Good Thursday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns organized team activities will be going on throughout the rest of May into June. Training camp in July. But currently, get a look at this. The Browns offense doing a little bit of conditioning in the sand of Puerto Rico as Deshaun Watson and the offense going through some drills. It's a nice way to train if you can with the ocean in the sand. Good workout going on as the Browns offense building some team camaraderie along with Deshaun Watson and that offensive skilled position group working out in Puerto Rico as Watson on his Instagram sharing some video from the workouts. Let's welcome in Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Quincy, that's a pretty good way to get in shape for the football season by the on the beach, by the ocean.
Most impressive, like Deshaun had his ball cap on that whole time. You know what I mean? Like that's an interesting look. Bright shorts, bright ball cap, no shirt. You know, not one I could pull off, but it's certainly a way to go out there. Like, it's impressive to see somebody have as good as footwork as he has, and then, like, just with the ball cap on, casual. Like, I would have to train for, like, 3 years just to get half as good at that foot speed. And it would probably look worse, and I wouldn't be able to wear a ball cap.
Well, and the other thing is in all seriousness, training on the beach, that is actually a good workout. People will run on the beach. It's harder to do, and it's points to the offense, building camaraderie and getting some work in.
Yeah, and another thing that people don't talk about enough, right, because we live in Cleveland and we think of inclement weather as just cold. But what you deal with a lot in September, in October, is inclement weather, which is hot, right? Like, it's just hot. And think about all the stuff you're wearing as a football player, helmet, pads. Like, imagine having a helmet on and it's like 98 degrees and you're exhausted, right? Like, that is a level of heat exhaustion that you're not used to. So, like, it's not a mistake that he goes to these really high areas to get these guys ready for camp and ready for the early part of the season where you're going to be playing in a lot of hot areas. Like, I don't think the team goes to Miami this year early in the season, but we've seen stuff like that where we don't think of inclement weather, and then we're talking about Miami having the best home field advantage during September because it's hot. It's like 200 degrees over there. So it's another thing to get the body used to the inclement weather. Even though we look at it as paradise weather, it's still inclement weather when you're working out, right? Like, it's real cool to be in Vegas until you start trying to do deadlifts in that sun.
All right. Obviously, still in the news, Za'Darius Smith trade was made official. Browns acquiring Za'Darius Smith, some draft swaps. Chris Sims from Pro Football Talk Live, NBC Sports, on the Browns acquiring Za'Darius Smith.
It's their new version of Jadeveon Clowney, but maybe even a guy that, you know, has got more pass rush value than Jadeveon Clowney the last few years. That's maybe the exciting thing. Now he's getting up there in age, and we're getting the injury.
There's that knee.
There's
that
a knee
keeps
right,
popping up.
Right.
That
he had the back
year.
2 years ago, right? Wasn't it? So, yeah, he is certainly at an age where teams start to worry. But for Cleveland Browns themselves, I think this was like the one glaring area of their team where you looked at to go, Who's going to line up opposite of Myles Garrett? What are they going to do here? You know, they got Jim Schwartz, new D coordinator there in town, and it did seem like they were incomplete. And obviously, this is why they had this on their radar. They got it done, and I think it's a good fit for them overall.
And I understand the age thing and all that, but they signed Okoronkwo. You've got 3 guys that you're comfortable with rotating through the edge as well. So the idea is to have a rotation where you don't have guys playing 45, 55 snaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want a rotation in there. Remember, they were comfortable giving Isaiah Thomas a lot of snaps at the end of last year as well. So that's somebody else that can factor into this. You want to have as much depth as possible when it comes to pass rushers because they come off the field all the time. You want to make sure that, hey, if Myles Garrett isn't out there, maybe you feel okay with it being Za'Darius Smith out there with Okoronkwo, right? Like, there's just so much versatility, so many options that you can have now that you have that another anchor opposite of Myles Garrett, and it allows you to, you know, be more diverse with how you set up these blitz packages.
Yep, and Jim Schwartz will have a number of them, and he'll be looking for matchups, not only to blitz, but guys that they can identify as this guy doesn't do this well, our guy does this well, that matchup favors us. Most of the national buzz has been how good the acquisition of Za'Darius Smith has been for the Browns. Albert Breer was on 92.3 Fans, the afternoon drive. This is what he had to say about that trade.
I think this is a guy, and you're bringing in a guy now in Za'Darius Smith that has his issues, that is very talented, and his last 3 full seasons in the league has had double-digit sacks. But, look, like he wore out his welcome in Green Bay. He, I think pissed a lot of people in Baltimore off when he agreed to go back there last year and then went back on his word. And then wore his welcome out in Minnesota. Like, put it this way, like the Dalvin Cook situation, right? Like the Vikings are working with Dalvin Cook to come to a solution on that. And one way or the other, like that's been a very above the board, like, hey, like we're going to work something out here or we're going to find you the right place. That's not the way the Za'Darius Smith thing went with the Vikings. The Vikings were just looking to offload him, And so that's sort of what you're bringing in. And look, like because it's a premium position, sometimes you have to do things like this if you want to try to bring in a guy who's got high-end talent. If you're not going to be spending over $20 million a year or a high draft pick on a guy, sort of is where they are right now and trying to find a real threat opposite Myles Garrett. And so you just hope you can keep him in line and make it work. And you hope being around Myles Garrett like having the sort of environment that you have will make it right for him. But clearly it didn't work out in Green Bay or Minnesota, and it's not like those places have bad environments to offer players.
Albert, is this Clowney 2.0?
Maybe. I mean, maybe.
Well, again, we know about dysfunction in Cleveland, Quincy, and they're looking at it as a one-year deal to find out if it gives Okunranku a little bit of time. It gives you the ability to develop Alex Wright, Isaiah Thomas. They're not looking at this as anything more than a one-year deal, is my read of it.
Well, and even if that, like, you have to take what Albert Breer said there with a grain of salt, because he's talking about things that maybe if you're in management, you're not the biggest fan of Za'Darius Smith because he doesn't handle contracts how you want him to handle it, or he's going to just get the biggest deal, or there's no quote-unquote sense of loyalty or whatever there. But I didn't hear anything that would indicate that he would be a locker room problem, right? There is nothing from that from anybody that's played with him. I've actually heard stuff to the contrary of that from people who played with him saying, hey, they love being around Za'Darius Smith. Za'Darius Smith is a locker room leader. This is a guy who was voted team captain by his team in the first year that he was there. So there's nothing that indicates that there's some kind of locker room issue. Maybe Albert Breer's talking to people who don't really work with the locker room, and maybe they work with the numbers and they don't like Za'Darius Smith for various reasons. But you have to be careful when you hear things like that, because there's a difference between somebody that management doesn't like and somebody that the team don't like. Somebody that management doesn't like doesn't necessarily affect the locker room environment, because management's not in the locker room. But if the locker room doesn't like him, if he's choosing not to play in certain positions like Jadeveon Clowney was, right, where he has beef with the team's best player on defense, like that's a difference. That's not what we're saying with Za'Darius Smith. So, I just think be careful when we hear reports like that and ask yourself, who is feeding this information? Because I don't think anybody's lying. But you have to understand people have sources from different areas of the team, and not everything's coming from the locker room. There's a lot of other places that information can be coming from, and you have to figure out, is that going to be important for the dynamic of the team on the field?
The other thing is the Browns are much more equipped to handle that with Jim Schwartz as a defensive coordinator, a guy who has been a head coach, a guy who is universally respected as a defensive coordinator. And I'm not minimizing the role Joe Woods played or any of that, but Jim Schwartz is a different level of defensive coordinator at this point.
Yeah, and like that defense last year stunk. Like, what did we talk about last year too with Minnesota's defense and the Browns defense? When you're on a team that stinks, nobody's happy to be there. Like, especially on defense. It's one thing if you go 3 and out on offense, right? Because if you stink on offense, you barely play. If you stink on defense, dog, you're out there all the time getting beat up. Like, it is different. Nobody's going to like each other. Everybody is hurt and everybody's getting beat. No, of course people weren't happy. If anybody was happy with Minnesota's defense last year, that would be a bigger question mark, right? You know, like the dysfunction last year, that is what it is, but I'm actually happy people were frustrated with how bad that defense was, because everyone was like, nah, man, it's cool. Let's relax. The vibes are great right now. Like, when the defense is absolutely a disaster, then that tells me that nobody really cares.
All right, before we go to break, you look at this defense on paper this year relative to how it looked last year. What do you say?
Oh, they're so much better. Right? They're so much better. You look at edge rusher, it's a complete upgrade there. Even from Jadeveon Clowney's best year, this is a guy who had like 40 more pressures than Jadeveon Clowney did in that 10-sack year that he had with the Browns in 2021. Well, 2022? Was it 2022? No, 2021. It was 2021. So you have somebody who's an upgrade there. I think you sufficiently upgraded the interior. Corner, you've added bodies to that. You've added Juan Thornhill. You've added Ronnie McLeod. You've added just a ton of bodies there on the cornerback side. So I think you're going to be fine there with what was already a solid group when it comes to talent. And then linebacker, I think some guys are going to be in better situations this year because of the upgrades on the defensive line to be much better. And then you upgrade it with the coaching. So, yeah, they're much better. They should be much better. Now, how far does that go? I don't know. Look, they were so bad last year, I can't predict this is going to be a top 10 defense. I'll wait until I see that. I'm willing to wait. That's how bad they were last year. But it wouldn't surprise me if they were one of the better defenses in the NFL.
Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, a little special teams talk. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns coverage. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Hi, guys. You guys are awesome. I'm so happy with Andrew Berry now. Finally getting special teams back together. No one ever wants to recognize special teams, but special teams is very important. I'm so happy we got Mike Ford. Mike Ford is a dog. He's in the dog pound. Yes, Andrew, you were finally scoring points with me because, like they were saying, the special teams has been horrible for at least 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, the last time we were really awesome with special teams was Joshua Cribbs. So thank you, Andrew Berry. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I am so happy with Mike Ford. All right, guys. So I just wanted to say that, and I love your show. Whoop, whoop. Go Brownies.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Quincy, Bubba Ventrone, and you go out and you get Mike Ford. There's another guy whose main role is going to be special teams. It's a DB, and the name escapes me. But they are putting an emphasis on special teams, which shows you don't do that unless you think you're going to be a really good team.
Yeah, you just don't. Every time I think about it, you always think about, what year was it? The 2010 or 11 Chargers, where they were the number one defense in all of football, the number one offense, the 32nd special teams unit in all of football, and they missed the playoffs, right? You just don't want that to happen. What you want with special teams is you want it to be unnoticeable, right? Just if you don't care when the team punts the ball, if you don't care when the team kicks the ball, if you don't care when they're about to go in and take an extra point, like if you feel comfortable enough using the restroom during special teams period, this team is finally where they need to be, because that tells me that there's a level of trust there that you don't think anything game-changing is going to happen. And I have just seen enough game-changing stuff happen. I don't need a great punt return. I just need get the punt. You know what I mean? Let the offense do its job. We paid Deshaun Watson $230 million to score them touchdowns. We paid you $8 million to catch it. You know what I mean? Just catch it to get it to Deshaun. That's cool. They go ahead on that side. Nick Chubb there too. You know what I mean? We don't need you to be great at kick return. We don't need a great kicker. Just make sure I'm not sweating after we score a touchdown because I feel like there's a 20% chance that we're going to miss this extra point. You know what I mean? Like, that's all I want. I just don't want to think about it. And unless we think about special teams, the better of a place we are in, unless we hit that other side of the uncanny valley where you in the Justin Tucker zone. But don't try to get to the Justin Tucker zone. It's called the Justin Tucker zone because there's only one Justin Tucker. So, you know, if you ain't got him, you ain't in it. So, other than that, I want to be in the bathroom break zone. That's a great place to be at, Dave. You know what I mean? Remember when Phil Dawson was here? 20 years. We were in the bathroom break zone when it came to the kicker. You know, field goal, extra point, I'm going to use the restroom. We good. Phil got this comeback. You see the 3 on the board, and you go on with your day. Now we sit here nervous every time. Oh, is Cade going to make it? I want to get into the bathroom break zone.
Putting the boredom back in special teams. I like the.
You know what I mean?
There's your slogan.
I need a boring special teams.
I gotcha. I gotcha. All right, this is from the Bleacher Report. Offseason report card for every team. For the Browns, free agency trade grade A, draft grade B+, extra credit project, hiring proven coordinators, and an overall grade of A-. That extra credit with the proven coordinators, I think. Quincy, we've talked about this. I think those were probably the 2 most important additions, being Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone.
At least for right now, like, we definitely feel much different about this whole situation right now than we would have if they would have made the same upgrades, but like if it was the same guy running the show. So we feel better about it right now. I think Jim Schwartz has proven that he's a competent defensive coordinator. We didn't feel like talent was the issue last year. We've added on the talent, and we felt like we just needed competency in the defensive coordinator position. And you got it with Jim Schwartz. He, at the very least, he's going to be competent. So there is that. I think that it's not hard to have a good defense with Za'Darius Smith, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and Greg Newsome on it. So Jim Schwartz's job's real easy, and when your job's easy, you can do the extra credit, and hopefully he gets to do all the extra stuff and get creative.
All right, this from CBSSports.com. Offensive infrastructure rating. So positions graded on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. So Browns are in Tier 3. They are 16th, and you see the teams that they're around, the Jets, the Raiders, Giants, Broncos. So they rank the quarterback as 3. That's kind of middle of the road. Play caller, 3.5. Offensive line, 4.5. Wide receiver, tight end, 3. And running back, 4. So, again, it's kind of middle of the road, which is probably fair based on what's happened the last couple of years. I think overall, I think it might be a little low. I think the offense is probably going to be better than that.
Yeah, I would think the offense is like it's really underselling Deshaun Watson, right? Like, that's middle of the road. Look, when Deshaun Watson has been out there, middle of the road is not what we ever described him as, right? Like, this year, he was a little bit of middle of the road because he was coming in at the 700 games. And honestly, in retrospect, the fact that he didn't look objectively awful tells me that he's probably really, really good, right? Because every other time we've seen him in a normal situation, he's been really, really good. So, and if Deshaun Watson's really good, then you have a running back that's one of the best in the NFL, if not the best. And then you have an offensive line unit that, you know, like a couple of years ago was the best offensive line in football in like the last 5 years. So, yeah, this offense could be really good. If the quarterback is right, that's going to really help things get easy for this team. And the ceiling is the roof, right, as Michael Jordan once said to North Carolina for this team.
Well, let me ask you this. When you look at this roster, I know it's May. How good do you think this roster is? I think it's even better than it was last year. I think the high-end talent, and I've been saying this all week, high-end talent has been good. The bottom of this roster, there's going to be some guys that aren't on the 53-man roster this year that can play, that other teams would want on their 53-man roster. And there's going to be several of them, I think.
This team's really good. You look at the 2020 team, right? And that's the team we've seen having the most success in this expansion era. You compare this team to them, hands down, they're better. At almost every key position, right? The only two spots where I couldn't say that this team's better than 2020 is probably running back and offensive line. Everywhere else, you're there, and even with offensive line, it's the same guys, basically, and it's still Nick Chubb at running back, right? So, yeah, this is a very, very talented team. They have a lot of talent on this roster, and when you look at the coaching side of it, you have Jim Schwartz, who is one of the better defensive coordinators in football. He's one of the more well-respected ones for sure. You have Kevin Stefanski, who won a Coach of the Year award in his freshman year as a coach. And you have Bubba Ventrone, who is one of the most sought-after special teams. So now, not only do you have the all-star roster, you have a very veteran coaching staff that is well-respected throughout the league. At each phase of this game, you are set to be a good team.
Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll start talking a little bit more about quarterbacks and quarterback rankings. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled Unfiltered Browns Coverage. NFL.com ranked the divisions by quarterback. So they ranked the AFC North number one. And you see Jackson, Burrow, Watson, Pickett. AFC East was 2, and the AFC West, where Patrick Mahomes lives, was 3rd. The rationale, I assume a full, normal football-focused offseason and preseason will go a long way toward returning Watson's game to the form that saw him earn 3 straight Pro Bowl bids from 2018 to 2020. And, Quincy, every time I see some of these rankings, I come back to that. I think people are forgetting, and you've said it earlier in the show. Guy was a Pro Bowl. Pro Bowl means you're one of the top 4 or 5 in the game. He earned 3 straight from 2018 to 2020, being Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, before everything went wrong with him, he was poised to be one of the faces of the league. Especially if you look at post 2019, where he had this dude who threw the blind eye touchdown. Remember that? The comeback versus Buffalo in the playoffs. We've really forgotten because we've had so much enter the void when he was out for those 2 years, right? Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow came along and came of age in that time that we've really forgotten where he was on that. But I think it's time for him to remind people, of where he was in that and where he lands now, right? He was talked about as the young quarterbacks in the NFL, like, hey, there's Deshaun Watson, there's Lamar Jackson, and then there's Pat Mahomes, right? He was in that conversation. Now he needs to re-enter that conversation. And the other 2 guys that are in that conversation with him have won the MVP. Like, that's a high bar that he was reaching early in his career. And that tells you the caliber of player that he thinks he is, that the league thought he was at one point, and that the Browns think he is, right? They don't think he's just a good quarterback. They think this is a quarterback who could win the MVP or at least be considered a true MVP candidate.
Yeah, and that's why you trade what they traded and pay them the money that you paid them, without question. This is also kind of interesting. This is from Dan Orlovsky. He has quarterback tiers. So the first tier, quarterbacks you win because of, and he delineates it as this year. Allen, Rodgers, Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. I got you there. Justin Herbert, Mahomes, and Hurts. Quarterbacks you will win a lot with. Tua, Mac, Jimmy G, Dak, Goff, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith. I question that. And then quarterbacks with a big season of answering questions ahead. Matthew Stafford, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. He puts Deshaun Watson in that and Kenny Pickett. I guess that's fair because of the 6 games last year. There are questions that have to be answered. Your reaction to that?
He put Trevor Lawrence in the tier of quarterbacks that you win because of. Am I the only one that remembered he threw 5 interceptions in a playoff game? Am I the only one that remembers watching that? I know he threw the 5 touchdowns. I know they won the game. I know the Chargers chargered, so they won. But do we forget that? 5 of them. 5. And we're ready to crown. We weren't talking about Trevor Lawrence like this in week 16, were we? We weren't talking about Trevor Lawrence like this in week 15, were we? We weren't talking about Trevor Lawrence at any point in the regular season. We were not doing this because he was not looking that good. He has one half, Dave, one half of good football. Couldn't even get more than 13 points versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And we're already putting him in. You win because of Trevor Lawrence. They almost lost because of Trevor Lawrence in that playoff game. What are they talking about? What is it? Am I the only one that is not wrapped up in this? I feel like I'm in an alternate universe where Trevor Lawrence has been Joe Burrow for the last 2 years, and I'm tripping because he hasn't, right? That's not been what's been going on with Trevor Lawrence at all. But we're putting him where?
He's getting extra credit because he survived Urban Meyer for a year, I think.
I understand, but we don't ever do that for the extra Ohio State quarterbacks, right? We're not doing that for Justin Fields. He did 2 years of Urban, right? If that's the case, then Cardale Jones should be in the league right now because nobody survived more Urban Meyer than Cardale Jones, right? Where is JT Barrett? Right, if we going to give discounts. Where's JT Barrett? Put him in the league, man. Somebody start him. Why not? If we giving out discounts? Because he wasn't even good with that last year. He was high. Why can't we just see? They make me a Trevor Lawrence hater because I got to be the one that comes out here and says, yo, nobody see this? Nobody see this? And now I'm the hater. Well, all I'm saying is, he all right, man. Why we got to act like he more than all right? Why we got to do this? Why we got to do this to Trevor? Why can't we wait? Why can't we wait to the end of the year? We can't wait. If Jacksonville go to the AFC Championship this year, I got nothing to say. But, dog, it's been a half of football.
I can't argue with that. All right, Deshaun Watson. How important are those first 4 games where 3 of them are against the division rivals? You throw in the Titans before that bye week. How important is the start to this year, and how good does Watson have to be?
Oh, it's going to be important, right? And he's going to be asked to be the best part of this team in one of those victories during this year. I'm wondering, right? How long do we give, hey, he had the weird offseason last year. He came off of playing 700 games. How long is Deshaun Watson allowed to be rusty and that be a fair excuse for him not playing well, right? How many games are they going to allow that to go on for? Because you play Cincinnati week 1. News. Probably going to need to throw a lot of touchdowns, right? Probably going to need to score the ball a fair amount against Cincinnati. Pittsburgh, not so much. We'll see what Baltimore is. That's another team that I'm not 100% sure about what they're going to look like. And then, you got the big test against the run game versus Tennessee. But that game, week 1, look, Deshaun can be kind of pedestrian those other 3 games, and the Browns can win. That game against the Bengals, you're probably going to have a good game out of him right out the gate. And it'd be interesting to see if he's ready for that.
Yeah, I would agree. The good news, though, is the Browns' defense matches up pretty well. They have the cornerbacks to run with the Bengals wide receivers, and not many teams do that. So I'm curious to see how Jim Schwartz attacks Joe Burrow as well. All right, before we go to break, top 30 players over 30 years entering the 2023 season. This is from Pro Football Focus. A couple of Browns on this list. Joel Bitonio comes in at number 7. Browns guard has earned a 92.8 PFF grade over the past 2 years, highest mark among interior offensive linemen over that span, paving the way for the Browns running backs and protecting the quarterback. And then also at 19, Za'Darius Smith, over his past 3 healthy seasons, has graded above 84.2 as a pass rusher while moving all over the defensive line. And again, you got a couple of guys on the other side of 30 that are key contributors. That just, again, shows you Browns are in win now mode.
Yeah, it's funny. We got 2 guys over 30 on the team. You know what I mean? But, now we're talking about the team getting older because we're used to this team being like 24. But yeah, they're at a different place. They want guys who've been there before. You brought in a lot of that, right? Ronnie McLeod's another guy who's been in the league for a while. Juan Thornhill's a guy who's won a championship a couple of times with the Kansas City Chiefs. You have guys like A-Walk in there who's like at the 28 range, almost 30 kind of range. Za'Darius Smith, who's been on some good teams as well. You need that kind of experience in there. You need veteran leadership, right? When something goes wrong and you have an issue in the locker room with a young player, that's where those vets really are able to step up and help a guy because they can be empathetic in a way that you can't as a coach, right? They can relate to a guy better than a coach can in that situation. So you have some vets in there, some good young players, some promising young players, and then you have guys that are in their prime that, should be ready to rip, like Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, and Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb. That's a lot of guys in their prime, my goodness.
It's time to start winning. Quincy Carrier and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Take a look at some of the predictions that are going around as far as playoff teams in the AFC North. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Quincy Carrier from Untitled, Unfiltered Browns coverage. This is from Sam Monson, Pro Football Focus's NFL show, talking about the Browns in the 2023 season.
So this time my logic was, well, let's look at a really difficult division and work on the basis that somebody's coming out of that as a wild card team. Consequently, the Cleveland Browns will make the playoffs this year. Yeah. Look at the work they've done.
A mighty roar.
Cheers
from the sound booth.
From the booth, the Cleveland fan Tyler Sovchek in there. Like, we just praised the work they've done along the defensive line, bringing in Za'Darius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, like Okoronkwo, all the work they've done to add players alongside Myles Garrett. That should help the secondary that was already talented perform much better this year. The offensive line is one of the best in the league. They've added receivers. Like, that's a pretty good core right now. Nick Chubb at running back, obviously David Njoku at tight end. Anything north of where Deshaun Watson was last season, which would be difficult not to achieve this year, should propel them at least into playoff contention.
And Quincy, when you kind of look at it position group by position group, it doesn't make sense that some of the people have the Browns rated middle to lower third of the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you're just kind of grading off reputation or being kind of jaded on some of the names there because you have seen this team not achieve a lot. And then it's important to remember, like, I feel like the further away we get from the game, like, the worse we act like Deshaun Watson played in those 6 games. He wasn't horrible, but he wasn't Deshaun Watson that we remember. and you still went 3-3 and beat like a playoff team. And you honestly should have went probably 5-1 in that stretch. Like 2 of those games, you had great opportunities to win, but we just dropped balls in the end zone. So, yeah, this team should be really good. It doesn't make sense why some guys are a little bit low. Maybe if they're just got Browns fatigue, because we've been saying that we were coming for the last 3 years and people are just tired. But I think this is probably the year that the team is going to be what everybody expects.
All right, so we've seen that end of it. Sam Monson, let's take a look at the other end of it. CBSSports.com, NFL playoff predictions. This from Will Brinson. So he's got the Bengals 13-4, the Ravens 12-5, being a wild card team. Steelers 9-8, Browns 7-10. I want to point out the Bengals play the Chiefs, Bills, 49ers, Vikings, and Jaguars, in addition to the 6 division games. Ravens play the Dolphins, Chargers, 49ers, and Jaguars, in addition to the 6 division games. He says the Browns went 3-3 last year with Deshaun Watson back, beating the Texans. Ravens, sans Lamar, and Washington. Maybe settle down on this coronation, Cleveland. He has the Bills, Jaguars, and Chiefs as the other division winners, and the Jets and the Broncos as the other 2 wild cards. I don't, and again, I think Will Brinson is pretty knowledgeable, but man, do I disagree with that. I'm not sure anybody in this division is going to be able to win 13 games. I don't think they're going to be able to win 12 games because these guys are going to beat each other up all season long.
Yeah, the 12's probably going to win the division if anybody gets it. Probably somebody gets to 11. We have a logjam with the 10-win team and a 9-win team. But, it's funny to me, like, people act like that Ravens win is nothing, even though that team did make the playoffs without Lamar Jackson for a long period of time. 6 weeks the Ravens went without Lamar Jackson? And, like, Dave, you tell me, does Lamar Jackson play safety?
Well, and the other thing is, Quincy, Lamar
Jackson not playing defense against him. Why does it matter if Lamar Jackson was? We talked all year about how great that Ravens defense was, right? All of a sudden, it don't matter because Lamar didn't play.
Well, and he gets beat up at the end of the year. If you play the Ravens at the end of the year, Lamar Jackson's usually beat up.
And then we don't talk about the fact that the Ravens almost beat the Bengals in the playoffs without Lamar Jackson. Like, acting like that was a worthless team without Lamar Jackson last year. It's kind of hilarious because I promise you, if you read his preview for the Ravens, and I haven't read it, but if you have, I promise you it's in there. Oh, look how well this team played without Lamar Jackson, right? But all of a sudden we get to the Browns and, it don't matter. They beat a Lamar Jackson-less Ravens team as if we walked in there and beat the 2016 Browns, right? Like it's that kind of drips to me, and maybe his emotions got the better of him in this prediction. And, the sauce that he added on in there, right? Settle down with the coordination, Cleveland. Tells me, hey, sometimes how we feel affects what we say. And most of the time, that's the case.
Right.
And I think that's probably the case with Will here.
But again, the AFC North is pretty much regarded as the best division. Nobody's winning 13 games in this division. 12, if a team wins 12 games, that's a team that's you better be fearful of come playoff time because
the Bengals won 11 games last year and the year before, and they're probably not better than they were those last 2 years this year.
Right.
So, they're probably going to win 11 games, right? Like, that's just, it's not that the Bengals aren't a team that could win 13 games in a different division. Yeah, they could. But in this division, where you got to play the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Browns twice, like, you're talking about sweeping 2 out of the 3.
Right.
If you go 13-4, that's not happening. You're not sweeping all 3 of those teams there. And we've seen the Bengals struggles with the Cleveland Browns because they just don't have a great setup to stop Myles Garrett.
All right. Before I let you go, this is kind of interesting. This is from Tony Grossi. It was in a Q&A article. Amari Cooper under contract for 2 more years for $20 million base salaries. Cap hits $23.776 million. An extension would greatly reduce those cap numbers. There's some thought that the drafting of Cedric Tillman was tip-off. The Browns don't envision Cooper staying beyond 2024. He will be 30 years old during that season. And again, I can understand that thought process, but if Amari Cooper goes out and plays really well, and they're going to try to find a way to keep it rolling.
Yeah, if it makes sense for both sides, right? Like, I think Amari's probably going to want to get one last payday in before he hits that, 32. Well, he'll be, 28, 29 at the end of this deal. So he's going to want to get one more contract in. And I don't think the Browns are going to be in position to do that and give him the big contract that he wants. So I think that's probably factoring into it more than anything, is that this team's probably not going to be in a position to give Amari what he wants, and that Amari's probably going to have to cash in somewhere else.
Yeah, that's probably fair. And again, that's why you get Elijah Moore. That's why you draft Cedric Tillman. You're trying to find somebody that becomes the. I mean, we're not used to that in Cleveland. It's the same thing with Nick Chubb. We're not used to that because we haven't had good players for a little bit of time here.
Yeah, absolutely, and that can sometimes be something that holds us back a little bit. Is our lack of use of success here.
Quincy Carrier, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Quincy.
No problem. You have a great day.
Quincy Carrier, make sure you check him out. Really good Brown stuff, untitled, unfiltered Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jackson McCurry from the DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast straight ahead. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. This one from the Bleacher Report. NFL teams that cannot afford to miss the playoffs in the upcoming season. They list the Browns as one of them. Rationale: the Browns are entering the fourth year of Kevin Stefanski's tenure as head coach. Upcoming season could easily be described as make or break for the 2020 Coach of the Year in the NFL. Also, fourth year for Andrew Berry as the general manager. Let's welcome in Jackson McCurry of the DawgLand and Top Dog podcast. Jackson, when you think of it in terms of the upcoming season, there's a sense of urgency. You can see it in the moves that the Browns have made, in the veterans that they've gone out. They're in win now mode.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've been talking about it on the podcast since the end of the year with all the moves that Andrew Berry and company have made in free agency and the draft and, making the big trades. They're in all-in now, all-in win mode. Now that they got Deshaun Watson, they're putting the pieces around him, solidifying the defense, adding Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. It's a make or break year for Kevin Stefanski and company. I think Andrew Berry might get a little leeway, get to hire his own coach, but if Stefanski can't get this team back to the playoffs and get Deshaun Watson back to what he was back in his Houston days, I'm fearing they're going to make a change. I like Stefanski. I think he's done a good job with what he's had the first few years here, but all the talent's in place now. Now he's got to lead this team back to the postseason, or I think a change will happen.
Yeah, and I think the key is going to be you got to get the offense to highlight and showcase Deshaun Watson. And again, I'm not minimizing Nick Chubb, but you need an explosive offense. You need Deshaun Watson to look like the guy that you traded the first-round picks and guaranteed all the money for.
Absolutely. I think when you have Nick Chubb, he was there to minimize the flaws that Baker Mayfield had, that Jacoby Brissett had. You traded, like you said, all the picks, gave all the money to Deshaun Watson because you think he's the elite quarterback that's going to get the Browns to the Super Bowl. Now you have to build that offense to show that Deshaun Watson is that guy. And I think the moves they've made this offseason, adding Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, bringing in Bill Musgrave, who used elements of the shotgun in Cal and has a connection with Stefanski in his past. This all builds around whether Kevin Stefanski can get Deshaun Watson back to that elite level that he displayed in Houston.
All right, so this is also from Pro Football Focus, ranking the easiest schedules of 2023. And they had the Browns as the 10th easiest schedule. Projected win total, 10. Easiest game, they say Week 16 against Houston. Hardest game, Week 1 against Cincinnati. Browns don't have any easy start or end to the season, facing the Bengals in both Week 1 and Week 18. However, an early bye in Week 5 that could set up well for them for the second half of the season. If Deshaun Watson can get back to performing at a high level, the Browns may do well. And again, every time somebody mentions Browns doing well, it always comes back to the quarterback. And that's fair. That's what the position in the NFL is all about.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the Browns have had a great offseason. They did well with the draft, with the limited picks they had. But it all, like you said, Dave, it all goes back to one thing. Can Deshaun Watson get back to form, get back to that top 10 level quarterback play? Like Quincy said earlier in the show, like Deshaun wasn't terrible, but he also wasn't great. But the fact that he looked average in those 6 games after being off for nearly 2 years, I think bodes well for Deshaun Watson getting back on track and leading this Browns team back to the playoffs, hopefully this upcoming season. But at the end of the day, it all lands on whether number 4 can get back on track.
What do you think they can do to help that? What unlocks Deshaun Watson? What gets him back to that level, do you think?
I think it's the downfield throwing and the fact that what they've added in the draft, adding Cedric Tillman, who is a guy that gets down the field despite running 4.5 speed. He's a guy that finds that high point down the field, getting the ball, and adding another downfield threat in Elijah Moore, who didn't have the best start to his career with the Jets, but you see that talent on display in flashes, despite having Zach Wilson throwing the ball to him. I think all the tools are there for Deshaun Watson to succeed. It's up to him at this point to go out and execute the offense according to what Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt, the game plan is.
Yeah, and I think they're going to find ways to get, for lack of a better term, easier yards. So in other words, Elijah Moore, if a guy's lining up 5 yards off, get him the ball and put the pressure on the defense to make plays. They didn't really have guys that were high-level playmakers in space, and they've kind of added a couple.
Yeah, for sure. I think Elijah Moore is a guy that can, break away from defenders because he's got elite speed, and I think that opens things up for everybody else. I think you can't really double up a receiver, hypothetically, in this offense because you have Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's been consistent his first 3 seasons, Elijah Moore, who has that, breakaway speed, and then you have David Njoku in the middle at the tight end position. So, it's going to be hard with all these weapons for defenses to try to game plan against. And then you have to add in the factor of Nick Chubb in the backfield. It's up to Deshaun at this point, but all the talent's there for him. to go out and have an elite year.
All right, before we go to break, these are Warren Sharp's quarterback rankings for 2023 from Sharp Football. And he goes Josh Allen 1, Patrick Mahomes 2, Jalen Hurts 3, Lamar Jackson 4, Herbert, Burrow at 6, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence 7 and 8, and then Watson ahead of Tua, who is 10th. So it's kind of interesting. Burrow down at 6, Fields and Lawrence ahead of Watson. But again, if Deshaun Watson performs as a top 10 quarterback, I think the Browns are going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that list is very interesting to me, the way that they're stacked up. But, yeah, like you said, if Deshaun's playing at a top 10 level, and if the defense is as good as advertised with the pieces that arrived, and, of course, the addition of Jim Schwartz, the Browns are going to be in really good shape come the end of the season, whether they're fighting for the division or one of the wild card spots. The AFC is so stacked, but I think if Watson returns to form, there's no doubt in my mind the Browns are a playoff team in 2023.
Jackson McCurry and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout, other side of the break. We will continue to talk about the Browns in 2023. Also, could they be adding some people to the roster? We'll talk about that. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns with Jackson McCurry from the DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast. This is from NFL.com. Top offseason priority for every NFL team. For the Browns, it all boils down to Deshaun. Former Coach of the Year Kevin Stefanski under immense pressure to better tailor the scheme to his highly paid starter. From there, it's up to Watson to prove he is still a top-tier quarterback. And Jackson, I mean, in fairness, you couldn't really tailor the offense to Deshaun Watson a season ago because Jacoby Brissett was playing the first 11 games of the year, and you were still trying to find a way to get into the playoffs. Having said that, I'm curious to see how this offense – Deshaun Watson has to have the ability to change some things at the line of scrimmage based on what he sees, because he's really good at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Stefanski and Van Pelt are, I think they're working closely. You heard all offseason about Watson and Stefanski having conversations about how the offense was going to be structured. Yeah, I do think, Watson's got to have the ability to, make adjustments and everything. But, you got to wonder, how much is Stefanski going to change it? Obviously, I think there's going to be more shotgun-based sets and everything. But, yeah, I mean, like that guy, like we've been saying this whole segment, it all comes down to whether Watson returns to form. And I think Stefanski knows that he's got to cater the offense to what Watson likes and, let Watson make decisions on the field. If he sees something defensively get changed, that he's got to be able to make those adjustments, because in order for this offense to succeed, Deshaun Watson has to succeed.
Yeah, without question. So when you look at this roster, it's deep, it's talented. I mean, if you want to nitpick, I guess linebacker, you might want to add somebody, maybe a running back. So let's look at the running back. If the Browns were to add one more running back to the roster, out of these guys, which one are you choosing? I just don't see the fit with Ezekiel Elliott. The others make a little bit of sense because you'd want a guy that you might be able to throw the ball to who could threaten the defense that way. I'm just looking at, again, I'm nitpicking at the offense. I'd like a a running back who is a threat in the passing game.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, obviously Ezekiel Elliott, he has the Ohio ties because he was a Buckeye. He's the sexy name because he's the best one out of that group that Tyler mentioned. But the Cordero Patterson thing has been on my mind the last couple of weeks. Colleague of mine, Jared Mueller, had mentioned it as a possibility. Atlanta saves, I think, over $4 million post June 1st if they cut him or trade him. This is a guy he's averaged almost 30 catches a year during his 10-year career, has really shined as a running back in Atlanta the last 2 years with 14 rushing touchdowns and 1,200 total yards in that 2-year span. I think he would be a perfect back to accompany Nick Chubb in that backfield. I like Jerome Ford, but just with the limited touches he had last year in the backfield, I don't think you can go into this year being comfortable with him as running back too. So out of those options, I would definitely try to see what Atlanta would want in a Cordero Patterson trade. So if we had to pick any of those guys, he would be my number one guy.
Yeah, and again, I don't mind McKissick. I get the idea. McKissick and Drake are both guys that have played in the NFL and give you a lot of experience and can be a threat out of the backfield as well. Let's take a look at this. Rookie ranking wide receivers by best situation. This is from Pro Football Focus. So in other words, what guys drafted came into the best situation? Number 8, they say Cedric Tillman for the Browns. The range for Tillman is anywhere between a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 5 for the Browns, which going by 2022 would put him in position for anywhere between 10 and 95 targets. Tillman coming off an injury-hampered season, but ranked 6th in the SEC in 2021 with an average of 2.46 yards per route run. The other thing, in 2021, he played really well against elite-level competition, being the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And those DBs are usually the DBs that are in the NFL.
Yeah, Tillman's going to be so fascinating to watch this year because there's really not a lot of expectations for him because he's coming in at best the 4th receiver behind Cooper, Peoples-Jones, and Elijah Moore. But it's going to be interesting to see what the Browns have in mind for him. You also have David Bell in that room. You have Marquise Goodwin. You have Jakeem Grant potentially. Like that wide receiver battle is going to be interesting in training camp. But yeah, Tillman is a very talented receiver. Didn't watch him a lot during the pre-draft process because he was an older guy, so I kind of thought the Browns wouldn't go that direction, but he is very talented. I thought he was better than Jalen Hyatt. I thought Jalen Hyatt was just the flashy, like downfield threat, but I didn't think he was more of a polished receiver the way Cedric Tillman is. So I am fascinated to see what the Browns have in mind for him in 2023, but I also think this pick is more so for 2024 and 2025 when Peoples-Jones and Cooper could both be off this roster. So you're looking at a scenario where Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman might be our top 2 receivers going forward in the future.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit earlier in the show. At some point, Cooper is getting up there in age in his late 20s, early 30s. Probably going to want one more payday if he has a couple of good years. And when you're paying a quarterback and you've got Myles Garrett and you've got all the pieces around him, you might not be able to afford Amari Cooper, and that's kind of the lens Andrew Berry is looking at this through.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously Cooper's making a lot this year and potentially next year, but I could see him sticking around at least through the end of this contract. Peoples-Jones is, I think, the guy to watch. I know, friend of the show, Jack Duffin, has mentioned anywhere between 10 to 12.5 million per year is something that Peoples-Jones will probably get on the open market. I don't see the Browns giving it to him at this point with the addition of Tillman and Elijah Moore this offseason. But Cooper, he probably won't be here long term. So the Browns are obviously going ahead and saying, we got Elijah Moore. Hopefully he's going to be here in the future. And we drafted Cedric Tillman, who obviously they are high on. They drafted him in the 3rd round. And you can't count out David Bell as well. I think he's going to play some kind of role in this offense as well this year. I feel really good about the wide receiver room because I think you have all 6 guys, including Marquise Goodwin, that I think are going to make some sort of impact on this offense in 2023.
And, you need them to. You go get them so that Deshaun Watson can, as we talked earlier, and it'll bring it full circle, you got to give Watson the weapons, so they're trying to do that as well. Jackson McCurry, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jackson.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
All right, Jackson McCurry, make sure you check him out, the DawgLand and Top Dogs podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.